The courtroom fell into an eerie silence, the weight of injustice hanging heavy in the air. Judge Harrison's gavel struck with devastating finality, each echo reverberating through Officer Daniel Brooks' chest like a bullet. 20 years of exemplary service, countless lives saved, and a drawer full of commendations all meaningless now as he stood handcuffed, convicted on evidence he knew was fabricated. But it wasn't the prospect of prison that shattered his world. It wasn't even the disgrace of being branded corrupt by the very system he'd dedicated his life to protecting. No, what broke Daniel Brooks was the realization that he would never again see Max, his German Shepherd partner of 7 years. "Your Honor," Daniel's voice cracked, breaking the suffocating silence. Before they take me away, I have one final request." He lifted his eyes, meeting the judge's stern gaze. "Please let me say goodbye to Max." The packed courtroom collectively held its breath. In the back, Max sat alert, his intelligent brown eyes fixed unflinchingly on Daniel, ears forward, sensing the gravity of the moment. The German Shepherd's muscular frame trembled slightly, a low whine escaping his throat. Judge Harrison studied the convicted officer, his expression unreadable. For what felt like an eternity, no one moved. Then, almost imperceptibly, the judge nodded. 3 minutes, he granted, his voice echoing in the hushed chamber. "But this gesture will not affect your sentence, Mr. Brooks." No one could have predicted how those 3 minutes would unravel a conspiracy that reached the highest levels of power, or how a loyal German Shepherd's devotion would expose a truth that would shake their city to its core. Leave a like and share your thoughts in the comments along with the city you're watching from now. Let's continue with the story. Daniel Brooks never imagined his life would end up here. Standing at 6 feet tall with graying temples and eyes that had seen too much, he carried himself with the disciplined bearing of his Marine Corps training. 20 years ago, he'd traded his military uniform for a police badge, bringing with him an unwavering sense of duty and honor that would eventually lead to both his greatest triumphs and his deepest tragedy. The defining moment came during a routine drug raid in 2017. While securing what appeared to be an abandoned warehouse, Daniel discovered a severely injured German Shepherd puppy, chained and malnourished, used as a guard dog by the drug dealers. Something in the dog's defiant eyes, still showing spirit despite its condition, resonated with Daniel. Against protocol and his superior's orders, he spent his own money on veterinary care, rehabilitated the pup, and named him Max. Sarah, Daniel's wife and fellow officer, had supported his decision completely. "That dog has your spirit," she'd said, watching Max's remarkable recovery. Sarah's death 3 years ago and a domestic violence call gone wrong left both Daniel and Max shattered. They healed together, their bond growing stronger through shared grief. Max became more than a police dog. He was Daniel's last connection to Sarah, a living reminder of her belief in second chances. Lieutenant Mark Donovan had been Daniel's mentor then, helping him through the darkness of Sarah's loss. A tall, distinguished man with salt and pepper hair and a politician's smile. Donovan had known Daniel since his rookie days. He'd championed Max's rehabilitation and training, making their partnership official despite departmental skepticism about a rescued dog joining the K-9 unit. That made his betrayal all the more bitter. The corruption in the department had grown like a cancer, subtle at first. Small compromises, looking the other way, evidence that disappeared, all justified as necessary evils to get things done. Daniel and Max's record of successful drug busts and their unwavering integrity made them both assets and liabilities to those benefiting from the corruption. Their effectiveness in drug enforcement was beginning to threaten the wrong people. Emily Thompson, a pragmatic detective with 15 years on the force, had worked alongside Daniel and Max for the past 5 years. Her brother James was deep in the department's internal affairs division, creating a complex web of loyalties that would soon be tested. Emily's sharp intuition and unwavering sense of justice made her one of the few people Daniel truly trusted, though even that trust would be challenged in the days to come. Now, at 9 years old, Max showed signs of aging, a touch of gray around his muzzle, a slight stiffness in his joints on cold mornings. Yet his dedication never wavered. Even as Daniel stood convicted, Max maintained his alert posture in the courtroom, his training warring with his instinct to comfort his partner. The German Shepherd's unwavering loyalty was about to set in motion a chain of events that would expose decades of corruption and force everyone to choose between self-preservation and justice. The case against Daniel Brooks began with a series of seemingly unrelated drug seizures that went missing from the evidence lockup. On paper, the trail led directly to Daniel and Max's drug interdiction unit. Someone had meticulously constructed a false narrative spanning 6 months, depicting Daniel as a corrupt officer who used his K-9 partner's drug detection abilities to identify valuable shipments, only to steal and resell them through a sophisticated network of dealers. The prosecution's evidence appeared overwhelming. Surveillance photos showed Daniel's police vehicle at locations where drug deals allegedly occurred. Bank records revealed mysterious deposits to an offshore account in his name. A confidential informant testified that Daniel had been selling information about police operations to drug cartels. Even Max's impressive drug detection record was twisted to suggest a pattern of selective enforcement, targeting only competitors of Daniel's supposed criminal associates. Lieutenant Donovan's testimony dealt the most devastating blow. Standing before the court, his voice heavy with rehearsed regret, he described how he had mentored Daniel after Sarah's death, only to notice troubling changes in his behavior. The signs were there, Donovan testified, his words cutting deep. The late-night meetings, the unexplained absences, the suspects who somehow knew we were coming. I didn't want to believe it, but as his supervisor, I had a duty to investigate. District Attorney Catherine Williams presented financial records showing that Daniel's modest police salary couldn't explain his recent purchase of a cabin in the mountains of property Daniel had never owned or even visited. The prosecution painted a picture of a grieving widower who had lost his moral compass, using his position and his trusted K-9 partner to build a criminal enterprise. What the jury didn't know was that the surveillance photos had been digitally altered, the bank records fabricated, and the cabin purchased by someone using Daniel's stolen identity. The confidential informant was a paid actor who had never met Daniel, and Donovan's testimony was a carefully crafted lie designed to destroy the credibility of an honest cop who had accidentally stumbled upon something far more sinister than anyone could have imagined. As Daniel sat through each day of the trial, he watched his reputation and career being systematically destroyed. The worst part was seeing Max's achievements, their proudest moments together, being twisted into evidence of corruption. Each time Max whined softly from his position in the courtroom, Daniel felt the weight of his partner's confusion and loyalty, making the injustice even more unbearable. The prosecution's case was a masterpiece of deception, constructed so carefully that even Daniel's most staunch supporters began to doubt him. Only Max, with his unwavering loyalty and keen instincts, seemed immune to the web of lies. What no one realized was that this same loyalty would soon begin to unravel the entire conspiracy. The mahogany-paneled courtroom had never felt more oppressive than during the closing arguments. District Attorney Williams stood before the jury, her voice carrying the weight of assumed moral authority. "The evidence is incontrovertible," she declared, gesturing to the stack of documents that had sealed Daniel's fate. Officer Brooks betrayed not just his badge, but every citizen who trusted him to protect their community. From his position at the defense table, Daniel maintained the rigid posture ingrained by his military service, though his hands trembled slightly. Max's occasional whimpers from the back of the courtroom pierced him like physical pain. The German Shepherd had lost weight during the trial, his coat lacking its usual luster, a mirror of his handler's deteriorating state. Judge Harrison's instructions to the jury seemed to echo from a great distance. Daniel barely registered the words, his mind fixed on Max, wondering who would care for his partner once he was gone. The jury's deliberation lasted just 4 hours, remarkably short for a case of this complexity. When the foreman stood, the verdict form clutched in his weathered hands, the courtroom collectively held its breath. On all counts, we find the defendant, Daniel Brooks, guilty. The word fell like a physical blow. In the gallery, Emily Thompson closed her eyes, her face a mask of disbelief. Lieutenant Donovan maintained his carefully constructed expression of disappointment, though something like satisfaction flickered in his eyes. Max's deep bark of protest cut through the murmurs, silenced quickly by his temporary handler. Judge Harrison's voice was grave as he prepared to deliver the sentence. "Officer Daniel Brooks, you have violated the sacred trust placed in you by this community. The evidence of your corruption is overwhelming. I sentence you to 20 years in federal prison." It was then, in that moment of utter defeat, that Daniel made his final request. The judge's grant of 3 minutes with Max seemed more like mercy than justice. As Max bounded forward, his powerful frame trembling with emotion, Daniel knelt despite his handcuffs. The German Shepherd pressed against him, whining softly, his keen nose working frantically at Daniel's jacket. "What's the dog doing?" The judge's question carried a note of concern. Max's behavior became more insistent, his paw scratching at Daniel's chest. The bailiff stepped forward, uncertain, but Max's training held there was no aggression, only urgent purpose. Then came the metallic clink that would change everything. A small voice recorder tumbled from a torn seam in Daniel's jacket, skittering across the courtroom floor. The prosecutor lunged forward, but Judge Harrison's sharp command froze everyone in place. "Don't touch that device." The silence that followed was absolute. Max stood protectively over the recorder, his posture alert, years of training evident in every line of his body. The judge leaned forward, his expression unreadable. "Bailiff, retrieve that device." No one could have predicted how the next few moments would shatter months of carefully constructed deception. As the bailiff reached for the recorder, Max's demeanor shifted subtly, not threatening but insistent. It was as if the German Shepherd knew that everything hinged on what happened next. The courtroom silence shattered as the recorder crackled to life. Lieutenant Donovan's unmistakable voice filled the chamber, each word more damning than the last. "The evidence is planted. Brooks and his dog are getting too close to the operation. We need him discredited before he connects the dots." Another voice responded, unfamiliar, authoritative. "Make it ironclad. His record makes him the perfect scapegoat. No one questions a dirty cop story these days." District Attorney Williams surged forward. "Your Honor, this recording cannot be authenticated. It could have been fabricated." Like the evidence against my client, Daniel's lawyer interrupted, finding his voice at last. The previously defeated man now stood straight, energy renewed. "I move for an immediate stay of sentencing." Judge Harrison's face darkened as the recording continued, revealing conversations that implicated not just Donovan but several high-ranking officials. He raised his gavel, silencing the growing commotion. "This court is in recess. Officer Brooks will remain in custody while this new evidence is authenticated." Max hadn't moved from his protective stance over the recorder, his brown eyes fixed on Donovan. The lieutenant's composed facade had cracked, a sheen of sweat visible on his forehead. As bailiffs approached to secure the device, Emily Thompson was already on her phone, her voice low and urgent. "Get me internal affairs. Now." The next hours passed in a blur of activity. The courthouse buzzed with barely contained chaos as investigators descended on the scene. Daniel, still in custody but now separated from the general holding area, watched through a window as Max was led away by Emily. The German Shepherd resisted briefly, looking back at his partner with obvious distress. "He'll be safe with me," Emily promised, her voice carrying an edge of determination. "And he might be the key to finding more evidence." By nightfall, the story had broken across local news channels. Lieutenant Donovan had disappeared, his office found empty, files missing. Judge Harrison issued an emergency order sealing all evidence related to Daniel's case. In holding, Daniel could hear the guards whispering about arrests being made across the department. Yet beneath the surface chaos, something more sinister was stirring. Emily's brother in Internal Affairs reported unusual activity, files disappearing from the system, security cameras experiencing technical difficulties, key witnesses suddenly becoming unreachable. Someone was cleaning house, and they were working fast. In her apartment that night, Emily watched Max pace restlessly. The German Shepherd's discovery had pulled one thread, but the whole tapestry of corruption had yet to unravel. Her phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "You don't know what you're getting into. Walk away." She deleted the message, then knelt beside Max, running her hand through his fur. "What else do you know, boy?" she whispered. "What else did you and Daniel find?" The recorder had changed everything, but Emily sensed it was just the beginning. As she prepared Max's dinner, her hand brushed against his collar, feeling something unusual. Frowning, she looked closer, finding a hidden compartment expertly sewn into the leather and inside a small USB drive. Emily Thompson stared at the USB drive in her trembling hands, the weight of responsibility pressing down on her shoulders. 20 years in law enforcement had taught her to trust her instincts, and right now, every fiber of her being screamed that she was standing on the edge of something far more dangerous than she'd imagined. In her modest apartment, Max lay alert by the door, his posture tense as if expecting trouble. The German shepherd hadn't eaten since the courtroom drama, his devotion to duty overriding basic needs. Emily recognized that same dedication in herself. It's what had drawn her to work with Daniel and Max in the first place. With practiced caution, she initiated her standard security protocols. Phones off, curtains drawn, white noise machine-activated procedures learned from years of investigating internal corruption. The USB drive's contents loaded slowly, revealing a meticulously organized collection of files. Daniel had clearly been preparing for this moment, documenting everything: surveillance photos, financial records, transcribed conversations. But what caught Emily's eye was a folder labeled simply Sarah. Her breath caught. Sarah Brooks's death during a domestic violence call had been ruled a tragedy, a desperate suspect, a hidden weapon, a split-second decision. But according to these files, the incident had been orchestrated. Sarah had been investigating corruption within the department, and her routine call that night had been anything but random. Emily's phone buzzed again, her brother James from Internal Affairs. She let it go to voicemail. James had been acting strangely since Daniel's arrest, his usual candor replaced by careful, measured responses. The files implicated officers throughout the department, including some in Internal Affairs. Until she knew more, she couldn't trust anyone, not even family. Max's low growl drew her attention to the window. A car had parked across the street, its occupants suspiciously still. Emily recognized the deliberate casualness of surveillance. They were watching her, which meant they knew she had the drive. Her time was running out. She quickly copied the files to multiple secure locations, her mind racing through options. The department was compromised, the DA's office couldn't be trusted, and even the FBI might have connections to this web of corruption. She needed a plan, but more importantly, she needed allies she could trust. Max padded over, pressing against her leg with quiet reassurance. Looking into his intelligent eyes, Emily made her decision. They would build their own investigation team, starting with retired officers who had left the force under suspicious circumstances. But Daniel had listed several names in his files, veterans who had been forced out after asking too many questions. The surveillance car's engine started. Emily gathered her essential documents and Max's leash. They would have to move quickly and carefully. She had sworn an oath to protect and serve, and now that oath would be tested in ways she never imagined. As she led Max out through the building's back exit, she whispered to him, "We're going to make this right, boy. For Daniel, for Sarah, and for every good cop they've destroyed." The night swallowed them as they slipped away, leaving behind the watchers who would soon discover their quarry had vanished. Emily knew that once she started down this path, there would be no turning back. But with Max at her side and the truth in her possession, she was ready to face whatever came next. In a dimly lit diner on the outskirts of town, Emily met with retired Detective Thomas Morgan, one of the names from Daniel's files. At 70, Morgan's hands shook slightly as he reviewed the documents, but his eyes remained sharp. Max lay quietly under the table, occasionally lifting his head at passing customers. "Richard Brooks," Morgan muttered, tapping a particular document. "I should have known he was involved. The apple didn't fall far from the tree, but in the opposite way everyone thinks." Emily leaned forward. Richard Brooks. Daniel's father, state senator now, but 30 years ago he was just another ambitious prosecutor. He buried cases that implicated his powerful friends, framed innocent people to advance his career. I tried to expose him back then." Morgan's bitter laugh held decades of frustration. "Next thing I knew, I was forced into early retirement, labeled unstable." The revelation struck Emily like a physical blow. Daniel had never mentioned his father, and now she understood why. The USB drive contained records of massive financial transactions between Senator Brooks's office and shell companies linked to the department. The corruption wasn't just about drug money, it was about power, influence, and decades of carefully orchestrated cover-ups. Morgan spread out more documents. "Sarah figured it out too, you know. She traced the money, followed the evidence right to the senator's door. That's why his voice trailed off, but the implication was clear. Sarah's death had been ordered by Daniel's own father. Emily's phone buzzed again, another message from James. This time she read it. They know about the drive. Get out now, as if on cue. Max's head snapped up, a low growl rumbling in his chest. Through the diner's windows, Emily spotted 3 unmarked cars pulling into the parking lot. Back door, Morgan ordered, already moving. There's a maintenance tunnel under the building. Used it during my investigations years ago. He passed Emily a weathered notebook. Everything I couldn't prove then is in here. Names, dates, operations, 30 years of corruption. Keep it safe. They barely made it to the tunnel entrance when they heard footsteps above. Max led the way through the darkness, his training making him invaluable in the confined space. Behind them, voices echoed through the tunnel, professional, methodical hunting. Emily's mind raced as they moved. The connections were becoming clear. Senator Brooks had built an empire of corruption, using the police department as his personal enforcement arm. Daniel and Sarah had unknowingly threatened that empire, and now the senator was cleaning house, willing to destroy his own son to protect his position. They emerged blocks away in an abandoned warehouse district. Morgan gripped Emily's arm. Listen carefully. There's a journalist, Rebecca Chin. She helped me years ago, tried to break the story. They couldn't touch her, too high profile. Find her. Come with us, Emily urged, but Morgan shook his head. I'm too old for running. Besides, they'll be watching you now. I can buy you time. He pressed a key into her hand. Storage unit 247, central storage. More evidence. Now go. Emily hesitated, but Max's urgent tugging at his leash decided her. As they disappeared into the night, she heard Morgan's voice calling softly after them, Tell Daniel. Tell him he's nothing like his father. Tell him we knew that, all of us who tried to fight this thing. Hours later, safe in a motel room paid for with cash, Emily reviewed Morgan's notebook. The web of corruption reached into every corner of city government, explaining why previous attempts to expose it had failed. But Morgan had included something else, a list of officers, judges, and officials who had resisted, who had paid the price for their integrity. Max whined softly, pressing against her leg. Emily scratched his ears, understanding his anxiety. They were now part of a fight that had claimed lives and destroyed careers for 3 decades. But in that moment, watching the loyal German shepherd who had started this revelation, she felt something she hadn't expected: hope. Rebecca Chin's office at the Daily Chronicle was exactly what Emily expected: organized chaos of papers, awards, and empty coffee cups. The veteran journalist listened intently, her expression growing darker as Emily presented the evidence. Max sat vigilantly by the door, his presence somehow making the cramped office feel more secure. Thomas Morgan, Rebecca said softly, touching the old detective's notebook. I always wondered what happened to him after everything. She looked up sharply. Have you heard from him since the diner? Emily shook her head. Morgan had disappeared after giving them cover. His apartment was empty, his phone disconnected. Another name added to the growing list of casualties in this fight. We need to move carefully, Rebecca advised, pulling out a thick file from her locked drawer. I've been collecting evidence for years, but could never connect all the dots. What you brought me. She spread out the documents on her desk. This could bring down not just Senator Brooks, but half the state's political machine. Emily studied the journalist's wall of investigations, 3 decades of corruption, violence, and cover-ups, all meticulously documented. We need to get Daniel out first, she insisted. He's vulnerable in custody. That's the problem, Rebecca replied. The moment we start moving, they'll know. Daniel could be transferred, accidentally put in with violent offenders or worse. We need a plan that protects everyone involved. Max's ears suddenly perked up, his body tensing. Moments later, they heard footsteps in the hallway, too heavy, too purposeful. Emily moved silently to the window while Rebecca calmly began shredding documents. Back stairs through the mailroom, Rebecca whispered, pressing a key into Emily's hand. My lake house. All my backups are there. Go. As Emily and Max slipped away, she heard Rebecca greeting someone cheerfully, playing her role perfectly. The journalist was adding herself to the list of allies, risking everything to expose the truth. At the lake house, Emily made her final preparations. The evidence was overwhelming: financial records, surveillance photos, witness statements, and Morgan's detailed notes. Rebecca's backup files provided the context needed to understand the full scope of the corruption. Now they faced the most dangerous decision of all: how to use it. Emily laid out 3 phones on the table, each representing a different path forward. The first would contact the FBI's Public Corruption Unit, potentially starting an official investigation but risking leaks from compromised agents. The second would send everything to major news outlets, creating public pressure but putting witnesses at risk. The third would reach Daniel's lawyer, focusing on freeing him first but potentially allowing others to escape justice. Max watched her intently, his brown eyes seeming to understand the weight of the moment. Emily knelt beside him, finding comfort in his steady presence. "What would Daniel do?" she whispered. The answer came with unexpected clarity. They couldn't save everyone at once, but they could start a chain reaction that would bring down the entire corrupt system. It would require precise timing, coordinated action, and absolute trust in their small network of allies. Emily picked up the first phone and began typing a message to everyone involved. "Operation Truth starts at midnight. No matter what happens, follow the plan. For Sarah, for Morgan, for justice." Max's tail wagged once, decisively. There would be no turning back now. Operation Truth began at precisely midnight with a series of coordinated moves. Emily's carefully crafted plan unfolded like a chess game, each piece moving with deliberate purpose. Judge Harrison received an anonymous package containing evidence of judicial tampering in Daniel's case. Simultaneously, 3 senior officers found copies of their own incriminating conversations on their desks. The message was clear: cooperate or be exposed. In her makeshift command center at Rebecca's lake house, Emily monitored the fallout. Max remained by her side, his keen senses alert to any threat. The German shepherd's behavior had changed subtly since their escape, more protective, more vigilant, as if he understood the stakes had risen. The first breakthrough came at dawn. Judge Harrison called an emergency hearing to review Daniel's case. The prosecutor's office, sensing the shifting winds, began distancing themselves from Lieutenant Donovan. But victory came with a cost. Emily's brother James was found unconscious in his car, an apparent accident that left him in critical condition. The message from Senator Brooks's camp was unmistakable. Rebecca's investigative skills proved invaluable as she traced the money trail deeper into the corruption. Documents revealed a pattern of selective enforcement that had allowed certain criminal enterprises to flourish while eliminating their competition. The police department hadn't just been turning a blind eye, they had been active participants in reshaping the city's criminal landscape. Emily's phone rang, a secure line from Daniel's lawyer. "They're moving him," the attorney warned. "Tonight. Maximum security transfer. This isn't standard procedure." The implications were chilling. A prison transfer provided multiple opportunities for accidents to occur. Working against time, Emily and Rebecca pieced together more connections. Sarah Brooks's investigation had uncovered evidence of Senator Brooks's involvement in multiple suspicious deaths, each carefully disguised as accidents or criminal activity. The pattern matched James's accident perfectly. The senator wasn't just protecting his interests, he was eliminating threats with surgical precision. Max's behavior shifted suddenly, his attention fixed on the window. Moments later, they heard the distinctive sound of approaching vehicles. Emily quickly activated their emergency protocols, destroying sensitive documents and transferring digital files to secure locations. As they prepared to evacuate, Max led them to a hidden entrance. Rebecca had never mentioned another of Morgan's careful preparations. Through the darkness, Emily heard the unmistakable sound of a helicopter approaching. The response to their investigation had escalated beyond local law enforcement. Someone with serious resources was now involved. In the beam of flashlight sweeping the property, Emily caught glimpses of tactical gear and professional movements. These weren't police officers, they were private military contractors. Taking refuge in a predetermined safe house, Emily received an encrypted message from one of Morgan's old contacts, Senator in emergency meeting. Department scrambling. Keep pushing, the pressure was working, but the growing list of casualties weighed heavily on her conscience. James in the hospital, Morgan missing, and now armed contractors hunting them. Rebecca arrived with new information. Senator Brooks had called an unexpected press conference for the following morning. Their actions were forcing him into the open, but that made him more dangerous. Her cornered predator fights most viciously. As dawn approached, Emily studied Max's tired but determined expression. The loyal German shepherd hadn't failed them yet. His instincts had revealed the recording that started this avalanche, and Emily had learned to trust those instincts implicitly. When Max suddenly lifted his head, ears forward with intense focus, she knew something was coming. The next few hours would determine not just Daniel's fate, but the future of justice in their city. The safe house's dim light cast shadows across Emily's face as she watched her brother James through the hospital room's security feed. Still unconscious, tubes and monitors surrounding him, James lay as a stark reminder of what they were risking. The doctors were optimistic about his recovery, but the message was clear: no one was safe. Max rested his head on Emily's lap, offering silent comfort. The German Shepherd's own sacrifices were becoming evident. He'd lost weight, his normally pristine coat showing signs of stress. Like everyone involved in Operation Truth, Max was giving everything to the cause. Rebecca entered quietly, carrying fresh coffee and a grim expression. Morgan's body was found, she said softly, placing a newspaper on the table. The headline read, "Retired Detective's Apparent Suicide Raises Questions." Emily's hands trembled as she read the article. They both knew it was no suicide, it was a warning. "He died protecting us," Emily whispered, remembering their last conversation at the diner. Max whined softly, sensing her distress. The German Shepherd had grown particularly protective since Morgan's disappearance, as if carrying the weight of the old detective's final mission. The personal toll extended beyond their immediate circle. Judge Harrison's daughter had been fired from her law firm without explanation. 3 officers who'd agreed to testify had their children expelled from private schools. Senator Brooks's influence reached into every corner of their lives, squeezing tighter with each passing day. Emily's phone buzzed with a message from Daniel's lawyer. The prison transfer was scheduled for midnight. They had hours to prevent what would likely be an orchestrated tragedy. Daniel had already survived 2 random attacks in custody, each carefully designed to look like typical prison violence. "We're losing people," Rebecca observed, spreading out their latest intelligence. "Officers who were willing to talk are backing out. They're afraid, and I can't blame them." She pointed to a list of recent departmental transfers and resignations. "The department is being systematically purged of anyone who might support us." The weight of leadership pressed heavily on Emily's shoulders. Each decision she made could cost someone their career, their freedom, or their life. The evidence they'd gathered was damning, but the human cost of collecting it was becoming unbearable. Max suddenly raised his head, moving to the window with purpose. Outside, Emily spotted a familiar car, her mother's. The elderly woman had been calling daily, leaving increasingly desperate messages. Emily couldn't answer, couldn't explain why she'd disappeared, couldn't share the burden of knowing her son James might never fully recover. "We're not just fighting corruption," Rebecca said, watching Emily struggle with her emotions. "We're fighting for the soul of this city. But the price." She gestured to the wall where they'd mounted photos of those affected: James in his hospital bed, Morgan's final known photograph, Sarah Brooks's memorial picture, and dozens of others who'd been silenced over the years. Emily knelt beside Max, drawing strength from his unwavering dedication. The German Shepherd's loyalty remained unshaken despite exhaustion and danger. In his steadfast devotion, she found the resolve to continue. They couldn't bring back those they'd lost, but they could ensure their sacrifices meant something. Morgan knew the risks, Emily said finally, standing to review their plans for stopping Daniel's transfer. So did Sarah. So do we all. We honor them by finishing what they started. As night approached, they prepared for their most dangerous operation yet. The list of allies had grown shorter, but those who remained were committed beyond fear or doubt. They had all lost too much to turn back now. The prison transport route had been carefully planned, designed to appear routine, while providing multiple opportunities for a tragic accident. Emily studied the map spread across the safe house table, marking potential ambush points. Max paced restlessly beside her, his training and instincts sensing the approaching confrontation. "Senator Brooks just canceled his press conference," Rebecca announced, hanging up her secure phone. "His office claims he's been called to an emergency session at the state capitol, but our sources say he's still in the city." She placed a surveillance photo on the table, the senator entering a private airport facility. Emily nodded grimly. "He's positioning himself for deniability. Whatever happens tonight, he'll have an alibi." The pieces were falling into place, revealing a carefully orchestrated plan. Senator Brooks intended to eliminate both his son and the mounting evidence against him in one decisive move. A message arrived from their remaining ally in the department. The transport detail had been changed at the last minute. The new team consisted of officers with direct ties to Lieutenant Donovan. More concerning was the route adjustment. The convoy would now pass through an industrial area with limited surveillance and multiple escape routes. Max's behavior suddenly changed. His ears flattened and a low growl rumbled in his chest. Moments later, they heard the distinctive sound of vehicles approaching from multiple directions. Emily moved swiftly to the window, confirming their worst fears. Black SUVs were closing in, their movements suggesting professional tactical training. "They found us," Emily stated calmly, though her heart raced. "Rebecca, initiate Protocol Delta. Everything we have goes public in 1 hour unless we stop it." She turned to their small team of trusted officers and former detectives. "This is it. They're not just coming for the evidence anymore, they're coming to end this permanently." The safe house, chosen by Morgan, had been prepared for this moment. As their pursuers approached, Emily's team moved with practiced precision. Max led them through a concealed passage Morgan had shown them, his superior senses guiding them through the darkness. Behind them, they heard the breach teams entering the safe house. The sound of systematic searching echoed through the walls. These weren't local police, but professional operators. Senator Brooks had deployed serious resources to silence them. Emerging in an abandoned subway maintenance tunnel, Emily received an urgent update. The prison transport was being moved up, scheduled to depart in 30 minutes. They were running out of time and their options were disappearing rapidly. "They're forcing our hand," Rebecca observed, her journalist's instincts sharp, despite the pressure. "If we move to stop the transport, we expose ourselves. If we don't, Daniel dies." Emily watched Max, noting how the German Shepherd remained focused despite exhaustion. His unwavering dedication reflected their own commitment. They had lost too much, come too far, to back down now. "We split up," Emily decided, her voice steady. "Rebecca, take the evidence to your contacts. Once it's public, they can't bury it." She checked her weapon, a gesture that felt both foreign and necessary. "The rest of us will save Daniel." As they prepared to separate, Emily received one final message, a photo of James, his hospital monitors showing critical alerts. The threat was clear: stand down or lose everyone. Senator Brooks was playing his final cards, turning their loved ones into leverage. Max pressed against Emily's leg, his presence grounding her in the moment. The German Shepherd's loyalty had started this journey, and now it would see them through to the end. The night ahead would determine not just Daniel's fate, but the future of justice in their city. The industrial district loomed dark and imposing as Emily positioned her small team around the predetermined ambush point. The prison transport route would pass through this corridor of abandoned warehouses in exactly 17 minutes. Max lay silently beside her, his dark coat blending with the shadows, every muscle tense with anticipation. Through her tactical radio, Emily monitored the other team's positions. Officer Sarah Martinez, one of their few remaining allies from the department, had established surveillance on the transport's approach. Former Detective James Wilson, who had come out of retirement to help, covered the eastern exit. Their small force represented the last line of defense between Daniel and certain death. Transport convoy approaching checkpoint. Alpha Martinez's voice crackled through the radio. Standard formation: 2 escort vehicles, 1 transport van. Wait. A pause filled with tension. Additional vehicles observed. Black SUVs, no markings, professional driving pattern. Emily's worst fears were confirmed. Senator Brooks had deployed his private contractors to ensure nothing went wrong with his plan. The transport wasn't just a transfer, it was an execution in motion. Multiple heat signatures in the surrounding buildings, Wilson reported, his voice carrying decades of experience. "They've set up their own perimeter. This isn't just an ambush, it's a kill box." Max's ears suddenly pivoted, catching something beyond human hearing. Emily had learned to trust the German Shepherd's instincts implicitly. Seconds later, she heard it too, the subtle sound of tactical gear against brick, movement in the shadows above them. "All units, be advised," Emily whispered into her radio. "They know we're here. This isn't their trap, it's ours." The realization struck her with crystalline clarity. Senator Brooks hadn't just anticipated their intervention, he had counted on it. This was his opportunity to eliminate everyone who threatened his empire in one decisive stroke. The transport convoy's headlights appeared at the far end of the street, moving with deliberate slowness. Emily could see the heavily armed escort teams, their movements too precise for regular corrections officers. These were trained killers operating under the thin veneer of official authority. Max's muscles coiled, ready for action, but Emily held him back. Years of training had taught the German Shepherd to read her signals perfectly. They needed to wait for the perfect moment to spring the trap that had been set for them while avoiding the multiple layers of danger surrounding them. Through her scope, Emily caught a glimpse of Daniel in the transport van's reinforced window. Her friend looked gaunt but alert, his military training evident in his careful observation of his surroundings. He knew what was coming, and he was ready. "All units hold position," Emily commanded softly. "Wait for my signal." She watched as the convoy entered the kill zone, observed the subtle positioning of hidden shooters in the surrounding buildings. Senator Brooks had assembled an overwhelming force, but he had made one critical mistake. He had underestimated the loyalty of a German Shepherd and the determination of those who still believed in justice. The first shot shattered the night silence with devastating precision. The transport van's front tire exploded, sending the vehicle into a controlled skid. Emily watched as the scenario unfolded exactly as Senator Brooks had planned, except for one crucial detail. They were ready. "Execute," Emily commanded into her radio. Simultaneously, Max erupted into action, his training transforming him from silent observer to protective force. The German Shepherd's bark echoed through the industrial corridor, causing momentary hesitation among the hidden attackers, a split second of uncertainty that gave Emily's team their advantage. The private contractors emerged from their positions, their black tactical gear making them nearly invisible in the darkness. But Max had already pinpointed their locations. The German Shepherd's acute senses had mapped out every threat, and now he moved with purpose, leading Emily's team to the perfect counter positions. Inside the transport van, Daniel remained calm, years of military training evident in his measured responses. As the guards moved to secure him, he caught the familiar sound of Max's bark. A subtle smile crossed his face. He knew that sound meant Emily had come. The firefight erupted with controlled chaos. Emily's small team, positioned strategically thanks to Max's earlier warnings, engaged the much larger force with surgical precision. Martinez provided covering fire from her elevated position, while Wilson's experience showed in his methodical elimination of the contractor's tactical advantages. Max stayed close to Emily, his powerful body serving as both warning system and protection. When a contractor attempted to flank their position, the German Shepherd's growl alerted Emily seconds before the attack. The bond between handler and dog, forged through years of training and trust, proved invaluable in the heat of battle. "Transport team is moving." Daniel Martinez's voice crackled through the radio. Through the smoke and confusion, Emily spotted 4 guards hustling Daniel toward one of the unmarked SUVs. This was the real extraction or execution team, using the chaos as cover for their true mission. Max reacted before Emily could give the command. The German Shepherd launched himself through the darkness, his powerful frame moving with incredible speed. The sight of the charging police dog caused the guards to hesitate, their training not accounting for this variable in their carefully orchestrated plan. That moment of hesitation was all Emily's team needed. Wilson emerged from his position, his experience evident in his economy of movement. Martinez provided precision cover fire, forcing the remaining contractors into defensive positions. The momentum of the battle shifted palpably. Daniel seized his opportunity, using his military training to break free from his distracted guards. Max reached him first, positioning himself protectively between Daniel and the threats surrounding them. The reunion of handler and dog, brief as it was, demonstrated the unbreakable bond that had started this entire chain of events. But victory came with a cost. A sharp crack echoed through the warehouse district, and Max yelped a sound that cut through Emily's heart. The German Shepherd stumbled but remained standing, blood darkening his coat. Despite his injury, Max maintained his protective stance, his loyalty overriding his pain. "Fall back to position, Bravo," Emily commanded, laying down covering fire as Daniel and Max moved toward their predetermined evacuation point. The night was far from over, and Senator Brooks's forces were regrouping. They had won this battle, but Emily knew the war was about to escalate to new levels of danger. In the dimly lit veterinary clinic, Daniel knelt beside the examination table where Max lay. The German Shepherd's breathing was labored, but his eyes remained fixed on his handler, tail weakly thumping against the metal surface. Dr. Patricia Anderson, a veterinarian who had treated police dogs for 20 years, worked quickly to assess Max's injuries. The bullet missed major arteries, Dr. Anderson reported, her experienced hands gentle but efficient. But he's lost blood, and at his age, recovery will be challenging, she met Daniel's concerned gaze. He saved your life tonight, and he knew exactly what he was risking. Emily stood guard at the window, her tactical awareness never wavering. The clinic had been Morgan's last safe-house recommendation, a location known only to trusted members of the K-9 unit. Outside, Martinez and Wilson maintained a security perimeter, watching for any sign of Senator Brooks's forces. Rebecca's evidence dump goes live in 30 minutes, Emily informed them, checking her secure phone. Once it hits the media, there's no turning back, she turned to Daniel, who hadn't left Max's side. Your father will know he's lost control of the narrative. His response will be extreme. Daniel nodded, his hand resting gently on Max's head. The German Shepherd had saved him twice, now first with the recorder in court, and now from his father's execution squad. The weight of everything Max had risked, everything they had all sacrificed, pressed heavily on him. My father, Daniel said quietly, the words bitter in his mouth. All these years I thought Sarah's death was random violence. But he ordered it. He ordered her killed because she was close to exposing him. His voice hardened with resolve. He won't get away with this. Not any of it. Dr. Anderson finished bandaging Max's wound. He needs rest, but knowing him, he won't take it. Police dogs like Max, they don't know how to quit. Just like their handler, she gave Daniel a knowing look. Keep him close. He'll be safer with you than anywhere else. A sudden burst of activity on Emily's phone drew their attention. James is awake, she announced, relief evident in her voice. And he's talking to federal agents. The hospital security footage shows who tampered with his car. We've got 'em, Daniel, all of them. Max lifted his head at the change in energy in the room, his training keeping him alert despite his injury. Daniel helped him carefully to his feet, supporting the German Shepherd's weight. The bond between them, forged through years of trust and partnership, had never been more evident. Senator Brooks is holding an emergency press conference, Martinez reported through the radio. He's trying to get ahead of the evidence dump, but something's different. He looks afraid. For the first time since this began, Daniel saw a clear path forward. His father's carefully constructed empire was crumbling, exposed by the unshakable loyalty of a German Shepherd and the determination of those who refused to be silenced. We end this tonight, Daniel declared, Max standing steadfast beside him despite his injury. No more hiding, no more running. We take the fight directly to him. Emily nodded, understanding the stakes. They had one chance to finish this, to ensure that Sarah's death, Morgan's sacrifice, and Max's unwavering courage would not be in vain. The final confrontation awaited, and with it, the opportunity to restore justice to a city that had forgotten its meaning. The midnight vigil at James's hospital room cast long shadows across Emily's face as she watched her brother struggle through physical therapy. 2 weeks had passed since the rescue operation, and the mounting costs of their fight for justice were becoming painfully clear. James's recovery would take months, perhaps years, and his career in law enforcement was effectively over. Max lay at the foot of James's bed, his own bandages a testament to their recent battles. The German Shepherd refused to leave Daniel's side, even for treatment, displaying the same unwavering loyalty that had exposed the corruption in the first place. Dr. Anderson had warned that the injury might permanently affect his mobility, yet Max maintained his protective stance, ever vigilant. Daniel stood at the window, his military posture unchanged despite recent events. The news played silently on the hospital room's television coverage of Morgan's funeral. The official investigation had ruled it suicide, but they all knew the truth. The retired detective's final act of protection had given them the chance they needed, at the ultimate cost. 3 more officers came forward today, Emily reported quietly, mindful of James's rest. They're willing to testify about the department's involvement in Sarah's death. She watched Daniel's reflection in the window, saw his jaw tighten at the mention of his late wife. The evidence is overwhelming. Even the FBI can't ignore it anymore." Daniel nodded silently, his hand absently stroking Max's head. The German Shepherd leaned into his touch, offering comfort even while dealing with his own pain. The bond between them had deepened through their shared trauma, each protecting the other in their own way. A soft knock at the door announced Rebecca's arrival. The journalist's usual confident demeanor was subdued, her face bearing the strain of recent events. "They found Judge Harrison's daughter," she announced without preamble. "Single car accident on Mountain Road. She's in critical condition." The news hit them like a physical blow. Judge Harrison had been crucial in reopening Daniel's case, and now his family was paying the price. Senator Brooks's retribution was systematic and merciless, targeting not just his opponents but their loved ones as well. James stirred in his hospital bed, his voice weak but determined. "How many more?" he asked, the question hanging heavy in the air. "How many more families will he destroy before this ends?" Max's ears suddenly perked up, his body tensing despite his injury. Moments later they heard the elevator at the end of the hall ding, followed by the measured footsteps of multiple individuals. Emily moved to the door, her hand instinctively reaching for her weapon. Through the small window, she observed 3 men in suits, FBI agents, but not from the team they'd been working with. Their presence could mean either salvation or another layer of corruption reaching into federal levels. Daniel made eye contact with Emily, a silent understanding passing between them. They had lost too much to trust blindly now. Max rose shakily to his feet, positioning himself between the door and James's bed, proving that even injured, his protective instincts remained undiminished. "Whatever happens," Daniel said softly, "we finish this. For Morgan. For Sarah, for everyone he's taken from us." Max pressed against his leg in silent agreement, their shared determination a quiet force in the somber room. The footsteps drew closer, and with them came the weight of another critical decision. Each choice they had made had extracted a terrible price, and now they faced another moment that would determine not just their fate, but the future of justice in their city. The FBI agent's presence at the hospital proved to be yet another layer in Senator Brooks's elaborate scheme. As they reviewed the agent's credentials, Emily received an urgent message from Rebecca. The journalist had uncovered documents that changed everything, evidence that reached far beyond their city's borders. In the hospital room, Daniel studied the documents on Rebecca's laptop while Max maintained his protective watch. The German Shepherd's keen senses remained alert despite his injury, a constant guardian even in his weakened state. The files revealed a pattern of corruption spanning 3 decades, with Senator Brooks at the center of an intricate web of influence and intimidation. "Sarah discovered this just before she died," Rebecca explained, highlighting key sections of the documents. The drug operations weren't just about profit. They were about control. Senator Brooks was building a power base, using the police department to eliminate rivals while protecting his chosen operators. Every major crime investigation in the past 20 years was manipulated to serve his interests. Daniel's hands trembled as he read the details of his wife's final investigation. Sarah had traced the connection between seemingly unrelated cases, mysterious disappearances, convenient accidents, and strategic arrests. She had discovered that his father wasn't just corrupt, he was the architect of a system that had transformed law enforcement into a personal enforcement arm. "The federal task force," Emily interjected, her voice tight with controlled anger. "They're not here to help us. They're here to contain the damage." She showed them a series of encrypted communications. "Your father has connections throughout federal law enforcement. He's trying to bury this at a national level." James struggled to sit up in his hospital bed, his face pale but determined. That's why Morgan was killed. He wasn't just a retired detective with old files. He was building a case that connected everything: the drug operations, the political manipulation, the strategic elimination of threats. Max suddenly growled, a low warning rumble that drew everyone's attention to the door. Through the small window they could see more suits arriving, their movements suggesting military or law enforcement training. The noose was tightening. "There's more," Rebecca said quietly, pulling up a final document. "Senator Brooks isn't working alone. He's part of a network of corrupt officials across multiple states. Sarah found evidence of similar operations in neighboring jurisdictions, all connected, all protected by the same system of influence and intimidation." Daniel looked at Max, seeing in the German shepherd's steady gaze the same unwavering commitment to truth that had characterized Sarah's work. His father hadn't just betrayed his family, he had betrayed everything the badge stood for, everything Daniel and Sarah had fought to protect. "He knows we have this," Emily stated, her tactical mind already processing implications. "That's why he's escalating. The FBI, the accidents, the pressure on families, he's not just trying to silence us. He's trying to protect an entire network of corruption." The weight of this revelation settled over the room. They weren't just fighting one corrupt senator or one compromised police department. They were challenging a deeply entrenched system that had spent decades accumulating power and eliminating threats. Through the window, they could see the sun setting over the city, casting long shadows that seemed to symbolize the darkness they were fighting. Max pressed closer to Daniel, offering silent support as they faced the true scope of their challenge. The German shepherd's loyalty remained their moral compass, a reminder of what they were fighting for in a world where loyalty had become a commodity to be bought and sold. The federal task force moved swiftly, seizing control of the hospital floor with practiced efficiency. Daniel watched through the window as teams systematically secured exits and established a perimeter. Despite his injury, Max positioned himself between the door and his human family, his protective instinct overriding his pain. "All evidence is to be surrendered immediately," the lead agent announced, entering the room with an air of absolute authority. "This investigation has been classified as a matter of national security." His credentials identified him as Special Agent Thomas Pierce, but his manner suggested deeper connections. Emily recognized the tactics. They weren't there to investigate, but to contain. Her phone buzzed with urgent messages. Rebecca's office had been raided, their safe houses compromised, witnesses suddenly recanting their statements. Senator Brooks's influence reached further than they had imagined. James struggled to sit up in his hospital bed. "You can't just bury this," he protested, his voice weak but determined. "People died for this truth. Good people. Sarah Brooks, Thomas Morgan." "Tragic accidents," Pierce interrupted smoothly. "Just like Judge Harrison's daughter. Just like what happened to you, Officer Thompson. Life can be unpredictable." The threat hung heavy in the air. Max's growl deepened, but Daniel placed a restraining hand on the German shepherd's head. They were outmaneuvered, surrounded by agents who answered to powers beyond their reach. Pierce's team began methodically collecting their evidence: laptops, phones, documents. Each piece represented months of work, sacrifices, and lives lost. Rebecca's careful investigation, Morgan's lifetime of collected evidence, Sarah's final discoveries, all disappearing into official custody, never to see the light of day. Daniel stood at the window, watching their hopes of justice fade with the setting sun. His father had won. The system of corruption was too deeply entrenched, too powerful to fight. The weight of defeat pressed down on him, made heavier by the knowledge that others had died believing in their cause. Max whimpered softly, pressing against Daniel's leg. The German shepherd's unwavering loyalty stood in stark contrast to the betrayals surrounding them. Even injured, even facing overwhelming odds, Max remained true to his nature, to his purpose. "You should be grateful," Pierce added, his voice carrying a final warning. "Senator Brooks is willing to be generous. Full reinstatement for Officer Brooks, promotions for those who cooperate, medical care for Officer Thompson, a chance to return to normal lives." Emily watched Daniel carefully, seeing the struggle in his face. The offer was tempting, a chance to protect what remained of their families, to end the constant fear and loss. But in Max's steady gaze she saw something else, the same determination that had driven Sarah to keep investigating, that had given Morgan the courage to stand his ground. As Pierce's team finished their work, a small detail caught Emily's attention. Among the agents, one moved differently, handled the evidence with unusual care. Their eyes met briefly, and she recognized the subtle signal: not all hope was lost. Daniel knelt beside Max, drawing strength from the German shepherd's unwavering presence. In the depths of defeat, surrounded by the machinery of corruption, a small flame of resistance still burned. They had lost this battle, but perhaps in that loss they would find a new way forward. In the quiet hours after midnight, Agent Sarah Chen of the FBI's Internal Affairs Division made contact. The junior agent who had caught Emily's attention during the hospital raid now sat across from them in an abandoned church basement, her career and life at risk for what she was about to reveal. "I've been investigating Senator Brooks for 3 years," Agent Chen explained, laying out a carefully preserved set of files. "The Bureau has been compromised at the highest levels, but there's a small group of us still fighting. When I heard about Sarah Brooks's murder, I knew it connected to our case." Max lay at Daniel's feet, his keen eyes following every movement in the room. Despite his injury, the German Shepherd's protective instincts remained sharp, his presence providing both security and comfort. When Agent Chen produced a familiar notebook, Max's ears perked up. It was Morgan's original case file. "Detective Morgan contacted us 6 months ago," Chen continued, her voice professional but tinged with respect. "He had built a parallel investigation, keeping the most crucial evidence separate from his official files. What you found was only part of the picture." The notebook contained detailed accounts of Senator Brooks's rise to power, carefully documented over decades. Morgan had traced the corruption from its beginnings: the first compromised officers, the initial drug operations, the gradual transformation of law enforcement into a private security force. Sarah Brooks wasn't investigating random corruption, Chen revealed, displaying photographs and transaction records. She had discovered something bigger. Senator Brooks wasn't just controlling local law enforcement, he was part of a nationwide network of corrupted officials systematically dismantling federal oversight. Daniel studied the evidence, his military training helping him recognize the patterns. The strategic positioning of corrupt officers, the careful manipulation of investigations, the systematic elimination of threats, it was all executed with military precision. His father hadn't just built a criminal enterprise, he had created a shadow government. Emily examined the financial records, her investigative experience finding new connections. The drug operations were just the visible part, she noted. The real power came from information control. They weren't just profiting from crime, they were deciding which crimes to pursue and which to protect. Agent Chen nodded gravely. "That's why they're so desperate to contain this. Your evidence, combined with what Morgan preserved and what we've gathered, doesn't just expose Senator Brooks. It exposes an entire system of corruption that reaches into federal agencies, court systems, and state governments." Max suddenly raised his head, a low growl rumbling in his chest. Moments later, they heard footsteps in the church above. Chen quickly secured the files while Emily and Daniel moved to defensive positions. But the German Shepherd's reaction wasn't aggressive, it was recognition. Rebecca appeared at the basement stairs, accompanied by a figure they hadn't dared hope to see: Judge Harrison. The judge's face bore the strain of recent events, but his eyes held firm determination. "The evidence isn't just on paper," Harrison announced, holding up a small device. "Sarah Brooks left insurance, a deadman switch that would activate if anything happened to her. Everything she discovered, everything she couldn't trust to official channels, it's all here." In that basement sanctuary, surrounded by those who had risked everything for justice, the path forward became clear. They had lost battles, but the war for truth was far from over. The evidence they needed had survived, protected by the foresight of those who had given their lives for this cause. Within the secure conference room of the FBI's regional headquarters, Director Catherine Wells reviewed the evidence with growing concern. The documentation was irrefutable, a comprehensive record of systemic corruption that had infected multiple levels of law enforcement. Sarah Brooks's deadman switch had released a carefully organized archive of evidence, each piece authenticated and time-stamped. Judge Harrison presented the legal strategy they had developed. "We need simultaneous action across multiple jurisdictions. The moment we move against Senator Brooks, his network will attempt to destroy evidence and silence witnesses. We can't afford to give them any warning." Director Wells nodded gravely, studying the tactical assessment on her screen. "I've identified trustworthy agents in each affected region. They're ready to move on my command, but we need absolute secrecy until then." Daniel sat quietly, Max resting against his leg under the conference table. The German Shepherd's presence had become a symbol of unwavering loyalty within the task force, a reminder of the integrity they were fighting to restore. Even the seasoned federal agents had come to respect what the injured police dog represented. Emily and Agent Chen worked methodically through the evidence, preparing secure documentation for multiple federal judges. The scope of corruption was staggering: 37 police departments, 12 federal offices, and countless local officials, all connected to Senator Brooks's network. "The indictments are ready," Judge Harrison announced. 28 federal judges have signed off, all vetted personally by my most trusted colleagues. Once we begin, there can be no stopping until we've reached the end. Director Wells studied the faces around the table: law enforcement veterans, dedicated investigators, and one loyal German shepherd, all united in their commitment to justice. Tomorrow at dawn, she decided, Operation Clean Slate begins with simultaneous raids across 16 states. The next 24 hours demonstrated the power of properly executed justice. As the sun rose, hundreds of federal agents moved with precision and purpose. Police chiefs found themselves facing arrest from their own trusted officers. Corrupt judges were removed from their benches mid-session. Senator Brooks's carefully constructed network began to crumble. At the Central Courthouse, Judge Harrison presided over the initial hearings. The evidence was presented methodically, each piece telling part of a larger story of betrayal and corruption. Sarah Brooks's meticulous investigation, combined with Morgan's lifetime of collected evidence, created an unassailable case. Daniel watched from the gallery as his father was led into court. Senator Brooks's usual confident demeanor had cracked, revealing the desperation beneath. Max, still recovering but insistent on attending, lay quietly at Daniel's feet. The German shepherd's presence seemed to remind everyone present of the simple truth that had started this journey: unwavering loyalty to what was right. The system worked, Emily observed quietly, watching another group of arrested officers being processed. Not the corrupted version they created, but the real system. The one Sarah and Morgan died protecting. Agent Chen nodded, her professional demeanor softening slightly. "This will take years to fully unravel. Some of these cases go back decades. But we've broken their power. They can't hide anymore." The courthouse hummed with activity as more evidence emerged. Officers who had been silenced for years came forward, their testimony filling in the gaps. The true scope of Senator Brooks's operation became clear: a decades-long effort to replace justice with power, law with influence. Max's ears suddenly perked up, his attention drawn to the courthouse entrance. Through the doors came more agents, leading Lieutenant Donovan in handcuffs. The man who had betrayed his badge, who had helped orchestrate Daniel's false conviction, looked small and defeated. Justice, slow but inexorable, was finally being served. In a stark prison interview room, Daniel Brooks finally faced his father. Senator Richard Brooks sat across the metal table, his expensive suit replaced by prison orange, the facade of power stripped away. Max lay quietly at Daniel's feet, his watchful presence providing silent strength for the conversation that was long overdue. "You ordered Sarah's death," Daniel began, his voice steady despite the emotion beneath. "My wife, your daughter-in-law. You had her killed because she discovered what you really were." The senator studied his son's face, perhaps seeing for the first time how much Daniel resembled his mother: the same unwavering integrity, the same dedication to truth that he had spent decades fighting against. "She was going to destroy everything I built," Richard replied, his voice carrying a hint of its former authority. "I offered her a place in the organization. She chose differently." Daniel leaned forward, his hands flat on the table. "She chose justice, like Mom would have. Is that why she left? Did she discover what you were becoming?" A flicker of something, perhaps regret, crossed the senator's face. "Your mother was idealistic. She couldn't understand that the world needs order more than it needs justice. Everything I built, everything I did, was about maintaining control." Max lifted his head, his intelligent eyes fixed on the senator. The German shepherd's quiet dignity seemed to underscore the hollowness of Richard's justifications. "Sarah knew what would happen," Daniel continued. "She left a message for me hidden in her investigation files. She knew you would come after her eventually, but she believed the truth would come out. And now it has," Richard acknowledged, a hint of his old calculating manner returning. "But what has it achieved? The system will remain the system. Someone else will take my place. The only difference is that now my own son has destroyed his family's legacy." Daniel stood, one hand resting on Max's head. "You're wrong. Our family's legacy isn't power or control. It's service. It's protection of the innocent. Mom knew that. Sarah knew that. Even Max knows that. That's why he never trusted you animals can sense corruption in a way people sometimes can't. The senator looked at the German shepherd, seeing perhaps for the first time what the dog represented: unwavering loyalty to truth, to justice, to what was right, everything he had spent his life working against. "I loved her, you know," Richard said quietly, and for once his voice carried genuine emotion. "Your mother, Sarah too, in her way. They were both. Better than I deserved." They were, Daniel agreed, and they would be proud to see justice finally served. He turned to leave, Max rising smoothly despite his healing injury. At the door, Daniel paused. "Goodbye, Father. I hope you find peace with what you've done." Outside the prison, Emily waited with Agent Chen. The sun was setting over the city, casting long shadows that seemed less threatening than before. The truth had been revealed, justice was being served, and healing could finally begin. Max pressed against Daniel's leg, offering comfort as always. The German shepherd's loyalty had started them down this path, and his unwavering dedication had seen them through to the end. In his simple, steadfast nature lay the truth that power and corruption could never fully understand, that real strength came from serving something greater than oneself. "Let's go home," Boy Daniel said softly. "We've got a department to rebuild." 6 months after Senator Brooks's conviction, the transformation of the city's police department had begun in earnest. The morning sun filtered through the windows of the newly established Ethics and Oversight Division, where Daniel Brooks now served as chief inspector. At his feet, Max dozed contentedly, his coat regaining its former luster, though a slight limp remained as a reminder of their journey. The changes went far beyond new offices and titles. Every arrest, every investigation, every departmental decision now underwent rigorous review by a citizen oversight committee. Judge Harrison had helped establish new protocols that emphasized transparency and accountability, ensuring that no single person could accumulate the kind of unchecked power that had enabled the previous corruption. Director Wells arrived for her monthly review, her presence a testament to the ongoing federal commitment to reform. "The numbers are encouraging," she reported, reviewing the latest statistics. "Public trust in law enforcement has increased 40% since the reorganization. More importantly, officers are reporting higher job satisfaction and improved community relationships." The rehabilitation of the department had not been easy. Many officers, even those not directly involved in the corruption, had struggled to adapt to the new standards of transparency. But the example set by those who had fought for justice, Daniel, Emily, and their allies, provided a model of integrity that inspired others. Emily, now heading the Internal Affairs Bureau, had implemented a revolutionary training program that paired veteran officers with community leaders. The initiative, inspired by the bond between Daniel and Max, emphasized that true law enforcement required partnership and trust, not just authority and power. "Sarah would be proud," Emily observed, watching a new class of recruits being sworn in. Among them stood officers who had come forward during the investigation, their courage in facing corruption now serving as an example to others. This is what she was fighting for: a department that serves justice, not power. Max lifted his head as Agent Chen entered the office, carrying final approval for the Sarah Brooks Memorial Training Center. The facility would serve as both a police academy and a community engagement hub, ensuring that future generations of officers understood the importance of ethical law enforcement. The German Shepherd's legacy had also grown. The department's K-9 program had been expanded, with special emphasis on rescue and community service roles. Max himself had become a symbol of loyalty and integrity, his story taught to every new recruit as a reminder that sometimes the most powerful force for justice could come from the simplest dedication to what was right. Daniel picked up a framed photo from his desk, Sarah in her uniform, smiling beside Max on his first day of service. The pain of loss remained, but it was now accompanied by the satisfaction of knowing that her sacrifice had led to meaningful change. The system she had died fighting to protect was finally becoming what it should have been all along. On a crisp autumn morning, James Thompson completed his final physical therapy session at the Rehabilitation Center. His recovery had become a symbol of the department's own healing process. Emily and Daniel stood with him as he walked unassisted down the hospital corridor, Max keeping a gentle pace beside them. The Rehabilitation Center had become more than just a medical facility, Under James's influence, it had evolved into an unofficial meeting place where injured officers and community members could find common ground. The conversations that happened here, away from uniforms and badges, helped bridge gaps that had seemed insurmountable months before. Judge Harrison visited regularly, his daughter now leading a support group for families affected by departmental corruption. Her own recovery had inspired others to share their stories, creating a network of healing that extended beyond the police force into the broader community. The hardest part wasn't the physical recovery, James reflected, settling into a garden bench outside the center. It was learning to trust again. Wondering who you could really count on. Max rested his head on James's knee, offering the unconditional support that had become his hallmark. But sometimes trust comes from unexpected places. Rebecca had transformed her journalistic focus, working with the department to create transparency initiatives that kept the public informed while protecting sensitive investigations. Her office, once filled with exposed drafts and corruption evidence, now displayed stories of police-community partnerships and successful reforms. The department's annual community picnic, once a perfunctory PR event, had become a genuine celebration of partnership. Officers and citizens shared meals, played games, and most importantly, talked openly about their hopes and concerns for the city. Max had become a particular favorite among local children, his gentle demeanor helping to reshape their perception of law enforcement. Daniel found himself spending more time with Morgan's widow, sharing stories of her husband's dedication and ensuring his legacy lived on through the department's new ethical training programs. The pain of loss remained, but it was gradually being transformed into something constructive, a foundation for building better relationships between police and the people they served. Emily's relationship with her brother had deepened through their shared experience. Their weekly dinners became a time for honest discussions about the challenges of reform and the importance of maintaining integrity under pressure. Max always attended these gatherings, his presence a reminder of the loyalty that had started their journey toward justice. The healing extended to unexpected places. Several officers who had initially resisted the reforms, fearing they would hamper effective law enforcement, began to see the benefits of transparency and community partnership. Their testimonies, particularly about improved job satisfaction and public cooperation, helped convince other departments to adopt similar changes. As sunset painted the rehabilitation center's gardens in warm colors, Daniel watched James walk confidently toward his car. Max padded alongside, still favoring his healed leg slightly but moving with purpose. The German Shepherd's journey from injured warrior to symbol of renewal paralleled their own path from broken trust to restored faith. 1 year after Senator Brooks's conviction, the Sarah Brooks Memorial Training Center opened its doors. The autumn morning was crisp and clear as Daniel stood at the podium, Max sitting proudly beside him despite his graying muzzle. The German Shepherd's presence at official functions had become a cherished tradition, a living reminder of the loyalty that had changed their city. Director Wells and Judge Harrison sat among the distinguished guests as Daniel addressed the first class of recruits. Today marks more than just the opening of a building, he began, his voice carrying across the gathered crowd. It represents our commitment to a fundamental truth that law enforcement must be built on integrity, transparency, and partnership with the community we serve. The training center embodied these principles in its design. Community meeting spaces shared equal prominence with training facilities. The walls displayed photographs telling the story of their journey from corruption to reform. Sarah's badge, Morgan's notebook, and a special tribute to Max, whose unwavering loyalty had sparked the transformation. Emily, now Commissioner Thompson, presented the department's new mission statement, crafted with input from officers and citizens alike. Our strength comes not from authority alone, but from the trust we earn every day, she declared. Every graduate of this academy will understand that their badge represents a sacred commitment to truth and justice. The changes had spread beyond their city. Departments across the country had begun adopting their reform model, sending observers to study their transparency protocols and community engagement programs. The Sarah Brooks Initiative, as it became known, was reshaping law enforcement culture nationwide. James, fully recovered and serving as the center's civilian oversight director, introduced the first class of instructor teams, each pairing a veteran officer with a community leader. This innovative approach ensured that future officers would understand law enforcement from multiple perspectives, building bridges of understanding from their first day of training. Rebecca's documentary about their journey, Loyalty's Price, had become required viewing at police academies nationwide. The film chronicled not just the exposure of corruption, but the harder work of rebuilding trust and creating meaningful change. Max's role in uncovering the truth had captured public imagination, demonstrating that integrity could prevail against seemingly insurmountable odds. As the ceremony concluded, Daniel knelt beside Max, whose devotion had never wavered despite age and injury. "You started all this, boy," he said softly, scratching behind the German shepherd's ears. "You showed us what real loyalty means." Max leaned into his touch, brown eyes wise with the understanding of one who had seen both the worst and best of humanity. The gathered crowd moved inside for tours of the facility, but Daniel remained a moment longer with Max. Looking out over the city they had helped transform, he felt Sarah's presence. She would have been proud of what her sacrifice had achieved, not just the exposure of corruption, but the creation of something better in its place. "Come on, Max," Daniel said finally. "We've got work to do." The German shepherd rose smoothly, falling into step beside his partner. Together they walked into the training center, where new guardians of justice were preparing to carry forward their legacy of truth, integrity, and unwavering loyalty to what was right. The story of a convicted police officer and his loyal dog had become more than just a tale of corruption exposed. It had become a testament to the enduring power of truth, the strength found in unwavering loyalty, and the possibility of genuine change when people and their four-legged partners stand firmly for what is right. In our twilight years, we often reflect on the values that truly matter: loyalty, integrity, and the courage to stand for what's right. The story of Daniel Brooks and his faithful German shepherd Max reminds us that even in a world that seems increasingly complex and morally ambiguous, the simplest truths still hold power. Like many of us who have witnessed the changes in our society over the decades, Daniel faced a system that had lost its way. Yet through the unwavering loyalty of his four-legged partner, he discovered that one pure heart could still illuminate the path to justice. This tale speaks to our generation's deep understanding that real change doesn't always come from grand gestures or powerful institutions, but from the quiet dedication of those who refuse to compromise their principles. Just as Max's simple, steadfast loyalty exposed corruption and restored faith in justice, we too can leave a legacy of integrity for future generations. Perhaps in our own autumn years, this story reminds us that it's never too late to stand for truth, to protect what matters, and to believe in the power of unconditional loyalty, a lesson we learn from our own faithful companions throughout our lives. I hope you enjoyed today's story. Subscribe to the channel so you don't miss more stories like this. Leave a like and comment below what you thought of the story. See you in the next video.